you have to start thinking about the word slope as a rate of change. Okay, in middle school, they probably didn't even mention the words rate of change, okay? But when you start applying this stuff to story problems, which we will, all right, then everything has a rate of change, okay? Over time, if we measured how high you were over time, you would have a rate of change. It would not be a consistent rate of change, a constant rate of change, but it would be a rate of change, okay? So that's going to be our focus, thinking of slope as a rate of change. All right, now the new mathematical notation that you're going to see later in a physics course. All right, you're going to see a little triangle with a y over a little triangle with an x. All right, now that little triangle there is a Greek letter, and it's delta. And so I read that as delta y over delta x. Okay, delta y over delta x. And you will see delta x, you'll see delta y in physics classes. All right, now what this means, on the top, when I say delta y, that means the change in the y coordinates. All right, so I'm just going to say in the y's, all right? Delta y is the change in the y's, the y coordinates. All right, delta x then on the bottom means the change in the x coordinates, or the change in the x's. Okay, now, that was probably not told to you when you went over slope, all right, in middle school, okay? They started out with real easy things. But there's a high probability that they gave you the slope formula. All right, so let's over here, let's do slope formula. So I'm hoping that you saw, and they probably just gave you part of the formula, so I'm going to write the part that they probably gave you, and then I'm going to add the part that I think is important for our class. All right, you hopefully have seen y sub 2 minus y sub 1 all over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. All right, that's the slope formula, okay? And I'm assuming that you were given that in middle school. All right, now the part that I don't like when people just give you that is, yeah, that is enough to calculate slope. But if I ask a more complicated question and I don't just say, hey, find the slope, you need more of the formula. You need the part of the formula that says m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1. All right, because what? We already know from slope-intercept form, we know that that m right there means slope. All right, I could give you 2 points, except not give you all the numbers to those points, and I could give you a slope, and then I could say, just find the missing number. All right, in which case, if that's the only part I remember, the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, I'm not going to be able to answer that question. I have to know this entire formula. All right, now, what's this formula based on? All right, this formula is based on, let's draw it right here, a pictorial example of this. All right, I have some line, all right, and on that line I would have 2 points, okay? So I might have a point right here, and I might have a point right here, okay? Doesn't matter which one is which. I could call this my first point. I could call this my second point. All right. So that's important to know which one is the first one, which one's the second one, because see these little 1s and 2s in here? Those are indicating which point it is. So if this was on a coordinate plane and I plotted the point, this would be x sub 1, y sub 1. I would graph that point. I would graph over to the x and then up to the y, and then I would plot it. This one is x sub 2, y sub 2. We know that ordered pairs have an x coordinate and a y coordinate. All right, so those subscripts are important. They have a meaning. All right, when the 1 subscripts are there, it's the first point. When the 2 subscripts are there, it's the second point. Okay, and then from that formula, I can figure out what the slope is there. Okay, so show of hands, how many people have remember this from middle school? Okay, so vast majority of us. Okay, so that's the part that I was hoping. Were you showing delta x over delta y over delta x? You have been. Okay, all right, so the vast majority have not. All right, but like I said, this will be introduced in physics. Okay, so now let's do another Just a little short thing here, which I'm sure you worked on in middle school. All right, there's 4 general slopes. Because really there's only 4 ways to be able to, for general slopes. There's only 4 ways that I can draw a line when I go to draw one. I'm going to put each one of these on a little tiny coordinate plane. So I'm going to draw the 4 coordinate planes first. Relatively small because they don't have to be very big. Okay, they end up being different sizes by the time we get done drawing them. Okay. Now, I could draw a line when I go to draw a line. I could start in the bottom left-hand corner and rise up to the top right. All right, I could do it anywhere in this coordinate plane. It doesn't make any difference. That's why I've used the word general. Okay, so let's just say I draw it right there. Okay, that's going from the bottom right up to the bottom left up to the top right. All right, when a line is at that angle, going in that direction, it is a positive slope. Okay, so hopefully you got that from middle school as well. Okay, now I kind of think of these as roads. I'm driving up the road here, so it's a positive slope. All right, if I start in the top left and go down toward the right, that would be like going down a hill. All right, again, I can draw this anywhere across here. All right, from middle school, do we remember? Negative slope. Okay, so this would be when you're down in Tennessee and Kentucky, right? You got hills. You can drive up the hill and you can drive down the hill. Drive up the hill, drive down the hill. Okay, in Indiana, do we drive up hills or down hills? No, unfortunately we do not. So what do our roads look like? Our roads look like that. They're flat, right? Because we see for miles. Okay, now, if you've ever been in Tennessee or Kentucky and you're coming down a hill and it'll say if there's a 2%, decline over the next 2 miles, all right, that's slope. Okay, so this might have a 3% incline going up. This might have a 2.5% decline going down. That's referring to the slope of that road and how it does. All right, so I'm not going up and I'm not going down. So what's the slope of this? 0. Okay, 0 slope. So literally this has a 0 slope. Okay, now one thing I want to add, all right, which we haven't done examples of this yet, but we will. When we do this, these are going to be numbers, right? These are ordered pairs. They're going to be numbers. I'm going to plug numbers in, so I'll have a number on the top, I'll have a number on the bottom. Okay, now when I get a 0 on the top, like when I subtract those 2 numbers and I get a 0 on the top and I get any number on the bottom, 0 divided by a number is 0. Okay, so when I get a picture like this and I've used this formula, I will get a 0 on the top, some random number on the bottom, and it doesn't matter what that number is, and it will always give me a 0, and then that means I have a horizontal line. All right, the other option would be what? To draw it straight up and down. All right, you kind of think of this as, okay, this could be the side of a building. All right, do cars drive up the side of a building? No, can't do it. So that means this slope is no slope. Undefined is the math word. Okay, undefined is the math word. All right, in other words, it can't exist. All right, it cannot happen. Cars can't drive up the side of a straight building. Okay, now, again, if I'm doing this formula, all right, I'm going to subtract those 2 numbers on the top, and I don't know, it'll come up to some number. I don't know what it's going to be. But then, when I subtract the 2 on the bottom, I'm going to get a 0. All right, any number divided by 0 gives you an error on the calculator. You try punching in your calculator, it literally says error most of the time. All right, but this will be, we will write undefined. I don't want you to write error. I want you to write undefined because we're referring to it as a slope. All right, so when 0 is on top, your slope is 0. When 0 is on the bottom, it is undefined. Okay, so maybe a little bit more detail than what you got in middle school. All right, so far so good. All right, lots of information. I am trying to give you way more information than you were given in middle school because you probably had just bare bones. Okay, bare bones information. Okay, let's do that formula and work out an example. We'll just do one. All right, so as an example, let's say it says find the slope. And let's say they give you 2 points. Let's say they give you a -3 and a 2 for your first point. And then let's say they give you an 8 and, I don't know, say a -6 for the second one. All right, now over here, because it was on the other piece of paper, I am going to rewrite the formula. And I'm going to put the m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, so that's our formula. And that's the formula I want you to get used to. I want you to use that m in there, okay? Because we'll do a second example here and I'll show you why. Okay, now, you may not do this on every problem that you do, but initially it would not hurt you, all right? Do some labeling before you start plugging numbers in, because the number one common mistake is kids will plug numbers in the wrong spot. All right, so this is clearly my first point. This is my second point. All right, so then go ahead and label this. You know the first one's the x, so this is x sub 1. This is y sub 1. Come over here to the second point, label it x sub 2, y sub 2. If you do that labeling, you're less likely to plug the numbers in incorrectly. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and work that out. So I'm going to write the formula down. Now, because I clearly know that from the problem I've been given here, I've been given these 4 numbers. So do I really need the m for this problem? I don't need the m for this problem. So it's fine to just go ahead and go y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, now let's start plugging the numbers in. Y sub 2 is a -6. I know I'm going to subtract. Y sub 1 is 2. X sub 2, 8, and then minus a -3. So now you've got to know how to work with your positive and negative numbers. You can do it any way you want. All right, I like to think of this as plus negative. I like to think of this as plus plus. So I make those changes. All right, you may do it any way you choose. But a -6 and a -2 gives me a -8 on top. And an 8 and a 3 give me 8, 9, 10, 11 on the bottom. So I have a -8 over 11 for my slope. So -8/11 for my slope. All right, now we do have some rules, okay, because we always have rules. It wouldn't be math if we didn't have rules. All right, so for my slope, I want the fraction reduced to lowest terms. All right, is 8 over 11 in lowest terms? It is, right? Because I can take 2 into 8, but I can't take anything into 11, so it's in lowest terms. So I'm good there. All right, now the other rule, you cannot have mixed numbers. So if the top number turns out to be bigger than the bottom number, I don't care. I'm going to leave it that way. Why? Because my formula has a top number and a bottom number. It has a delta y and it has a delta x. So I can't turn it into a mixed number, because if I have a mixed number, then I've got a whole number and a number on top and a number on bottom. And there is nothing here that indicates that there's any type of whole number in front. I need to make it match my formula. Okay, so those are 2 really important rules right there. Now, that's just straightforward. I used the formula and I didn't use the m and I didn't need the m. Okay, that would have been a question you would have had in middle school. Not very challenging, okay, because almost all of you can plug the numbers in and do that simple math. However, we're now in high school, we're now in Algebra 1, we're going to beef up the question a little bit, okay? What if the question said, find the missing variable? All right, and then they give you, let's say they give you, let's say a 4 for an ordered pair, and then 8. And then let's say they give you an x sub 2, and then let's say they give you a -10. And they give you m equals, let's say 2/5. So they've given me 2 points. They've given me an m, which is the slope. All right, but here, instead of giving me a number, they've just labeled it x sub 2, and they wouldn't have even, I could have put a z in there, or a t, or a p. I could have put any letter I want, right? It's just a variable. Okay, now what I would do, again, go through and label stuff. All right, this is our first point. This is our second point. M's already labeled, so I don't really need to label that. This would be x sub 1, this is y sub 1, this is x sub 2, which matches my x sub 2 there, and this is y sub 2. All right, so to answer this question, can I start with just this part of the formula, or do I need the entire thing? I need the whole thing because they give me m. All right, if you never memorize that entire formula, then you're going to go, well, how do I work this problem out? But if you have this as your entire formula, you're going to plug 2/5 in for the m. Okay, so I'm going to start plugging things in here. Let's go back to purple. All right, so my m, I'm going to replace right there. So I'm not going to write the formula down. I'm just going to go 2/5. All right, now I'm going to do y sub 2 minus y. All right, y sub 2 is negative 10 minus y sub 1 is 8 all over x sub 2, which I'm actually going to put x sub 2 in there, minus my x sub 1, which is a 4. Can I do a little bit of math on the top there? Can I do negative 10 minus 8? Yeah, that's what, negative 18. So then I would have 2/5 equals a negative 18 over x sub 2 minus a 4. All right, now, before Christmas, if you can remember back that long, does that look like a proportion that we used to solve? All right, we solved proportions, okay, except I didn't have x sub 2 in there. We solved proportions before Christmas. Maybe it had a 4 and a 5, and then maybe it just had an a minus a 7 over an 8. All right, we solved things like this before Christmas. All right, well, it doesn't matter whether I have an a or an x sub 2. It's the same thing, right? Cross multiply down. Okay, again, you do not have to do the arrows. All right, I do the arrows just to kind of show you what I'm doing here. Okay, so 18 times 5, I'm going to cheat and get a calculator out real quick. 18 times 5, because I don't want to work that hard in my head. It's 90, all right, and it's got the negative in there, so that's going to be a negative 90 equals, again, what do we do when we have a binomial? We put the set of parentheses down, x sub 2 minus a 4. All right, I'm going to come up here to finish because I'm running out of room here. I'm going to rewrite that line. So negative 90 equals a 2 parentheses x sub 2 minus 4. Can I distribute the 2? Because I just have a little equation here. So negative 90 is equal to a 2 x sub 2 minus 2 times 4 is 8. Are we to a two-step equation here? Can I add 8 to both sides? Add 8, add 8. Okay, negative 90 plus 8, negative 82. Negative 82 is equal to 2 x sub 2. All right, how do I get rid of a coefficient in front of a variable? Divide both sides by 2. All right, so that would be what? A negative 41 is equal to x sub 2. All right, so I have found my missing x coordinate right there as negative 41.